If
Good time. Good time.
Are we live? Are we doing it? We're live. Hey, everybody around the world. It's WinSync. Thanks for tuning in to our online offstage chamber music festival. We're about to get started with our second live event where you're going to get to meet Garrett on the flute and Emily on the oboe. But first, we need to quickly thank our state and local sponsors for their incredible support. Our programming is made possible in part by the City of Houston and the Houston Arts Alliance, the Texas Commission on the Arts, the National Endowment for the Arts, the Boniek Institute for Religious Tolerance's Arts of Tolerance program, and the Huff Foundation. Huge thanks to those organizations for their continued support and to viewers like you. If you have any questions for Garrett and Emily or myself during the live stream, please feel free to type them in the comments section or go to our Instagram. We will be there taking questions. We'll have some time at the end to answer them. But before we get to Garrett and Emily, we actually had a couple of questions left over from yesterday's live stream for me. Really quickly, Debbie Woot Woot wanted to know how to help a clarinet section who is squeaking. So really quickly, a lot of young beginners, they like to clamp down on the reed. They munch. They're like C clamping down the mouthpiece. You're gonna squeak a lot if you do that. Also, they're taking in too much mouthpiece. You don't have to take in that much. If you take in too much mouthpiece, too much of the reed is vibrating and it's not controlled and you're gonna squeak. So there's that one. And another question we have, one of our Instagram followers asked how I got to be in WinSync. Well, wouldn't you know it, I was actually working on a doctorate up in Rochester, New York, and I had known about WinSync for a long time. I knew that they were an amazing wind quintet based in Houston, and I knew the clarinetist. I knew he was amazing, and he found another job, and I immediately put my foot down. I want to be in WinSync, and so I sent a bunch of videos and CDs and a resume and a headshot. I'm just kidding, no headshots. And it sort of worked out. They were buying what I was selling. So luckily I got to leave Rochester and I made the move down to Houston. So here I am now in Houston.
Never looked back.
Never looked back, never loved ya. All right. All right, let's begin today's live session with Garrett and the flute. Happy Earth Day, Garrett.
Happy Earth Day. What would you like to know, Julian?
I would love to know how you started music and where did you study the flute?
So I think like most wind and brass beginners, I started in my middle school band program. And that's very common because wind and brass instruments are a little bit more intricate in terms of learning how to produce a sound. So unlike students that learn piano at a really young age where you're kind of pushing on something and the sound is immediate, or a string player who's dragging the bow across a string and the sound is there, wind and brass instruments are a little bit more complicated, and thus we typically start a little bit later. So I think most of the WinSync members actually did start in middle school band programs. I wanted to get an instrument in my hand so fast, and I'm not really from a very musical family, so that was the first opportunity for me to actually be able to get an instrument. And then where did I study? I did my undergraduate at the University of British Columbia with the wonderful Lorna McGee. And then I moved down to Houston to Rice University for my master's degree to study with Miss Leon Bizey. So I'm pretty lucky to have those two on my resume as well.
Wow, love that for you. Do you have any, you mentioned the string earlier, like pulling a bow. I have a question for you. If you were a string player, what instrument would you play?
If I was a string player, I would play the cello. And actually the reason is me and Emily, we are often kind of the melody line and play really high just because of the nature of our instruments. And I get really jealous from Kara and Ani getting to play these like really sultry, low parts all the time. And so I think I would just kind of do a 180 and go in the other direction and go for the low.
Ooh, I love that. So on top of doing low melodies and stuff that you want to, you also can do a lot of extended techniques, and maybe against your will, I'm going to share a video from a live wind-sing concert. This piece is called Suru no Sugomori. It is arranged by Garrett himself. It is from a live concert. I don't remember when, but
let me tell you a little bit about it. Let me tell you a little bit about it first, just for context.
Oh, go ahead.
So this piece is a traditional Japanese tune that is performed on the shakuhachi. And so in arranging or adapting this for the modern flute, I try to incorporate, like Julian said, some extended techniques. So you'll be hearing pitch bending, you'll be hearing tremolos, and you'll be hearing flutter tongue, just kind of elements like that that are supposed to depict the shakuhachi. And just another point of context for this piece, it is meant to depict the life cycle of the crane. And this was from a program that we did back in 2017 when we were celebrating the 40th anniversary of the Voyager mission launches, which included the Voyager Golden Records. And so our program that year incorporated a lot of pieces that were featured on those Golden Records. So WindSync adapted a bunch of those for the Wind Quintet. This one, however, is for solo flute. And Julian, you can take it away.
All right. Let's see if I can do this correctly. Boom. All right, that's a good place to start. Love that, Garrett. Amazing. Stunning. First of all, love that quarantine buzz cut on you in the performance. Wow, beautiful.
I was thinking the same thing. I should go there. This is my quarantine haircut right now. I did this the other day.
I have a question for you. How long did it take you to arrange that, and how did you arrange it?
It was a very interesting process because it was all done just orally. Obviously, there's not a transcription of that because everything is kind of oral tradition in shakuhachi playing as well. So I listened to a lot of recordings, and it was a fun process trying to find ways to replicate some of those unconventional sounds that I'm not used to accessing on the modern day flute. So it was enlightening for me, actually, kind of a first, and hopefully not a last.
Oh, Okay. Do you have any other video examples of maybe not extended techniques, but something more beautiful, or maybe some um, flute players you look up to? Tell me about your
Yeah,
flute
I wanted to
idols.
share. I wanted to share one last video, which actually features two of the leading flute pedagogues out there right now. That is my former teacher, Miss Leon Bizey, and Amy Porter. And this example is just, it's cute. It's just really, really fluty. And I thought we could leave off our flute demo with just some really fabulous flute sounds. So this is a Kulao duet.
Love that. Here we go. Am I doing it? I'm doing it.
Emily, you and I should do some of those.
No.
It didn't even occur to me. That would be really cute. Every flute player knows of Kulao, by the way. That's just a rite of passage for flute players. So
No, I'm down. Let's do it.
Yeah, maybe we'll do some of that a little bit later. Amazing. Okay, thanks, Garrett. You can have a seat now. Let's go ahead and meet Emily and the oboe.
Hello, everyone. This is me and my oboe.
Emily, how did you start music? When did you start music?
Actually, it's funny that Garrett mentioned string players because I actually started when I was 4 years old on not the oboe but the violin. Another reason why wind players start maybe a little later is because there aren't any like little oboes. I guess there's a piccolo oboe, but those are very rare. And so our hands, when we're little kids, aren't big enough for a lot of the wind instruments. But they do make teeny tiny violins. So I actually started on a box attached to a ruler and a stick for my first violin when I was 4. And then, like Garrett said, in middle school, I picked up the oboe and I did both throughout basically high school. And then went on to college. I had to actually choose between the violin and the oboe because I wanted to do also another degree, a biology degree. So I couldn't really do 3 majors because that would be crazy. So I actually chose the oboe because I love the violin, but there are so many wonderful, amazing violinists out there. And the oboe, there are a lot of wonderful oboists too, but the oboe is a little more of a rare instrument. So sometimes people don't even know what an oboe is. So.
Oh, I wonder what a student oboe would look like if they had a small version of the oboe, what it would sound like.
I don't want to know what it sounds like.
Can you imagine the reed on that thing? Okay, speaking of reeds, we have to address the elephant in the room. As a clarinetist, I can commiserate with you on reed making. Well, not reed making, but reed battling, I guess. Tell me about your experience with reed making. How long does it take to make one reed and how long does it last, for example?
Yeah, that's a great question. So for those of you who don't know, the oboe is a double reed instrument while the clarinet is a single reed instrument. So Julian has one piece of wood for his reed. And the oboe and the bassoon, which you'll hear about tomorrow, have 2 pieces of wood on their reed. And oboists and bassoonists, we make our own reeds. And so we spend a lot of time, hours and hours, learning how to make reeds, perfecting the craft, because it's actually a huge part of our playing. If you don't have a good reed, I feel like I just can't do anything. Ugh. But yeah, so how to make a reed, it's just, it takes a long time. It's a multi-step process. It all comes from this stuff right here. This is called cane, oboe cane, a rhododendron, the specific type of cane. And it comes in a tube, so as you can see here. And so we have to go through a whole process of splitting, gouging, shaping, and then tying it onto these cork parts called staples, and then scraping it down. And like my old teacher used to say, you just scrape away what's not a reed, and what you have left is a reed. And that takes it's kind of, the processes take over multiple days, and every oboist does it a little differently. But if I were just to have a tied reed and scrape it down to something I could play, maybe it would take me 20 to half hour. It might not be good, but I could do it pretty quick.
Wow. And so say if you're playing like a couple of hours a day, how long would a reed last you?
Yeah, so oboe reeds especially, they're so small, they don't last very long. So I would say like a typical reed when I'm on tour or when I'm playing a lot, maybe for 4 days, 5 days, maybe. Um, but if there's like a student who doesn't play as much, their reed can actually last, 2 weeks. It just depends on how much you play. I wouldn't really recommend having a student play on super old reeds though, because it does change a sound as it gets older. The wood gets weaker, so we have to constantly be making these reeds. And clarinet reeds are bigger, so they last a little longer, I'm guessing. And bassoon reeds, definitely, they're much bigger, so they can last a long time. So.
And before we continue answering questions, and people, if you have questions, please feel free to comment and leave us a message. I have a question. How do reeds change depending on elevation, height, humidity, temperature? How do you deal with that?
I don't. Actually, it's really funny when we're on tour, Julian and I are usually just in the backstage crying before a concert because none of our reeds work. Garrett is
accurate.
Not. Yeah, it's because yes, reeds are so small, especially like an oboe reed. It's so small, it's affected by elevation, humidity, temperature, all that good stuff. So if I'm at really high elevation, my reeds get so like collapsed, like I can't even get them to like vibrate sometimes. But also when I'm in Houston, when it's really humid, I like Houston the whole thing because I have to come to Houston a lot. They get really open because it's so humid. The air is just so humid. And so then it's hard for me to control the reed. It just opens up. So all of these factors, I have to kind of make reeds or at least adjust reeds depending on where we go. Yeah, and clarinet and bassoon reeds similarly as well.
Well, I know I keep like a whole box of reeds ready to go with me wherever we're touring, but how many reeds do you keep on hand? That is a question from Elena.
Okay, I keep around maybe 4 or 5 concert reeds. And then I have around 5 to 10 practice reeds. If I just need to like hash out, technique, or if I have to hash out like memory work, because we all play from memory. I don't necessarily want to play on my absolute best reed and wear it out. I want to save those for a concert. Sometimes when we're on a long tour, I can get run a little low on my concert reeds. So sometimes I only have like 2, which is bad. Never do that. Always have extra.
All right, let's get into some oboe playing examples. Can you tell us about your favorites?
Yeah, so actually the first example that I have is one of my oboe heroes, Albert Meyer. He's the principal in the Berlin Phil, and he's just this wonderful, wonderful oboist. I love the sound of all the different types of European playing as well as American style playing oboe. There's actually quite a big difference between American and European, and within Europe there's a bunch of differences as well. But Albert Meyer has this like beautiful, just vibrant sound and can just do things effortlessly. It's crazy to me like how amazing he is, and I've listened to a lot of his recordings. And the example I chose to share is the prelude from Ravel Le Tombeau. It's actually one of the notorious oboe solos, known for being fast and difficult to make absolutely seamless. And I think Meyer does like a fantastic job.
Love that. All right, let's
You can
pull up
still
that
listen.
example. And before we do, William Fu loves your painting, Emily. All right, here it is. How do I do this?
Yeah,
Love that.
that excerpt scares me just because it's just, you gotta be.
I was about to say that the amount of times I've heard that in the practice rooms going to school.
Yeah, everybody's practicing that.
What else? Another example you have?
Yeah, the other example I have is actually of my teacher. It's awesome that Garrett shared one of his teachers. One of my teachers, Richard Kilmer, who is the professor at Eastman, he is the other big influence in my life. He actually was the one that steered me towards chamber music. And he also was very encouraging of me doing a bio degree and an oboe degree, but never went easy on me. So, but this example, it's called A Single Voice for Oboe and String Quartet. It starts out with this oboe solo, just no strings, just the oboe solo. And I think like the nuance and the musicality that he displays in this recording is really shows what he teaches us as his students. He talks about, turning the corner. He talks about intervals and stuff and how we need to connect things and phrasing and all of that beautiful musical knowledge that he has. And he displays it, I think, really well in this opening oboe solo. So we can take a listen.
Let's do it.
Yeah,
Wow, that's awesome.
His playing is just awesome. And it was awesome to study with him too. So.
Wow, Gorgina. Okay, Emily, now you can take a seat, and we have questions for both Garrett and Emily about how the flute and the oboe work in quintet and orchestras. First, though, we want to mention we have a shout out from Michael who wants to know what Garrett thinks of Lizzo.
Oh she's remarkable.
Great, love that.
But actually, I just don't. I could never have the swagger that Lizzo has. I wasn't born with that cool gene, but she's taking the flute in a very important direction.
Okay, we have a question from Scott at NYC. Maybe compare and contrast the way you use and manipulate the air between flute and oboe. Similarities, differences.
Well, as an oboist, we actually, because our reed is so tiny, we don't actually get to use that much air in comparison to a flute player. Because the flute, as maybe you saw in Garrett's video, they just blow across the top. There's no resistance coming back from a reed or a mouthpiece or something. And on our oboe reed, we have to fit our air through this tiny reed. So there's actually a lot of back pressure for oboes, and that's why they say oboists go crazy. But I think that might be besides that, the difference in how much air we're using. We do a lot of the same things with our vibrato when we play louder, supporting the air. A lot of wind instruments use the same basic fundamentals of air use. Garrett, do you want to jump on?
Yeah, I mean, it's an ongoing battle all the time, but oboe and flute are constantly paired together in the wind quintet or in the orchestra. It's just kind of where our instruments sit. And I think what Emily and I have found in trying to find that perfect kind of blended sound together is that balance is the key factor. And often, because the oboe has such a direct core to the sound, and the flute doesn't exactly have that in terms of its nature, that kind of balancing to the oboe has given us the most amount of success. So oftentimes, Emily will just be a little bit more present than I am when we're trying to do, joint melodies together. I think that is kind of like the number one go-to for us to try and find that really beautiful blend with these two instruments.
Speaking of blend, do you guys have any fun video examples you'd like to share about oboe and flute playing maybe a nice octave melody together?
Well, it's funny you asked, Julian. So yes, the oboe and the flute are paired together a lot, and oftentimes in octaves, which means we're playing the same note, but I'm playing a lower version usually, and he's playing a higher version, because the flute plays much higher than the oboe. So that's often the case. Sometimes when composers want a specific sound, I'm playing the upper octave, but in this example, we have our Winsync playing Maslanka's third quintet in the second movement, which actually features a beautiful flute solo at the beginning, but it ends with a chorale. And I thought this was a great example because the first time you hear the chorale melody, it's just the oboe. And then when we do the repeat, Garrett comes in an octave higher, and we try our best to make it so seamless, like you hardly even notice that the flute and the oboe, like the flute joined. It's just like, oh yeah, that's how it's supposed to be, and not too much of a jarring difference. So maybe
my job is to enter and not derail the whole thing.
Right.
All right, here it is.
I think Garrett did not derail. So
He did not derail. Good job, Garrett.
It's
Love that for
pretty
you.
scary stuff. Yeah.
How about when a flobo is in not octaves? What happens then?
I don't know what happens, Garrett.
I don't know what happens, Malou.
Yeah, so sometimes when we're not playing in octaves, it's called harmony, where usually, again, because the flute has the higher voice, the flute has the main melody line, and the oboe can act kind of like a second flute or like another voice to support the flute. So then it's my job now to have Garrett be the feature, and my job is not to derail and to kind of try to make my sound like a flute. And so we have an example here of an arrangement of mine, Claire de Lune, originally for piano, but in this one section near the end, the flute and the oboe go up really high, and I'm trying my best to do a good second flute impression. So let's see if I succeed here.
Beautiful.
Those are some hard examples. Ooh.
I know.
Simply divine.
Find some other examples that I was just like, but these showcase it pretty well. And for those oboists out there, that was a high F that I had to start on. So boom.
Ooh, we love that. Okay, time for some questions from Facebook, Instagram, and the like. We have hi from Germany. Hello. He has seen different types of oboes, like in Austria, oboes have a rounder part near the reed. What is the difference in sound, and what are they? Are they different fingerings?
Yeah, actually, that's the Viennese oboe, which is really cool looking, and that little round part there is kind of like a resonance chamber, I believe. I hope I'm right. It's kind of like, it reminds me of like when you see an English horn, which is the bigger version of the oboe, they have that round bulb at the bottom for resonance. So those kinds of oboes, I think they do have different fingering, which so you have to learn different fingerings. More importantly, they have different reeds. There's a long scrape reed in America that we use, and then there's a short scrape reed usually the European oboists use, and you have to play them differently. So there's a lot of differences, and that's why I think the oboists around the world sound so unique and different. One of the most unique sounding instruments out of all of them. But yeah, so there's a whole bunch of different types of oboes, and I love them all. I don't have a preference of anyone. I wish I could play the Viennese oboe though.
Yeah. Question for Garrett and the flute. Do you have a perspective as a male flute player for students and experience with stigmas? Aw.
Oh, that's a very interesting question. I think I probably experienced that when I was in middle school. You get a lot of students picking instruments to be in their group of friends, which is great. I mean, when you find a section full of your friends, that's fun. And often it will be the case that a lot of 12-year-old girls are playing the flute, which was my experience also. But looking beyond that, when you're looking at professional flute players and examples of the best in the world, it is a beautiful 50-50 of flute players, male and female. So I would say trying to point young male flute players to some of those role models that they would like to see to feel a little bit more pride or confidence in what they're doing. It stops after middle school. Male flute players exist everywhere. You just kind of have to look for them a little bit harder. So.
Love that. Oh, hi, Nancy from Memphis. We miss you. Next question. What advice would you give to students who are hoping to go into a career in performance, especially at this difficult and uncertain time?
Ooh, that's tough. I guess all three of us could chime in here. Yeah, so students right now, I think in any career, are kind of wondering what's next, because it's just a difficult time for everyone. For music, I think as long as you love what you do, like you have to have the passion, you have to have the drive, and you love what you do, and be creative, you can still pursue music even in a time like this. Like we're not even together right now, but we're trying to do this online content, and you can do a lot of home projects. Like I know a lot of people are using that acapella or the layering app or something, so you can create music that way. There's no reason, just because we can't be with other people, to stop music making ourselves. And plus, the plus side I would say is that since we have a lot of extra time, since we're at home, we have a lot of time to practice. So
yeah, and I was gonna say, like, the industry is going to change so much after this, so I'm curious to see how it's going to change.
I also just wanted to add that I've been so inspired to see how much online content has become available for all of us. Just some of the most remarkable teachers that are available on all of our instruments are actually putting out information and videos and tutorials and all of that, which we probably didn't have access to before all of this started. So you're actually able to get a lot of instruction from pedagogues around the country and around the world at this point. you might have to do a little bit of digging right now, but it is invaluable information that you can start working on from the privacy or the comfort of your own space right now. So there are pluses and minuses to what is happening, but if you kind of take the glass half full mentality of this, it can be a really great time to kind of explore different possibilities. And I will also say that I think a lot of these teachers are now offering lessons on Zoom or online. So you might not have been able to reach out to the flute player in the Chicago Symphony right now, but this is a great time where they actually might be willing to get on an hour-long flute lesson with you, and that's something you might not have been able to do before. So yeah, just create your own opportunities.
Yeah, love that. Yeah, okay, so let's wrap things up. We have a quick question from Caroline. She wants to know if we can still do Zoom sessions with schools. Are we doing Zoom sessions?
Yeah, why don't you
Yes.
message us, DM us, and we'll get in touch. We've actually done Zoom sessions with some universities already with their chamber music classes. So we would be happy, like we're willing and able to help out where we can, but definitely get in touch with us, either on direct messaging us on Facebook, Instagram, or emailing us, contact@winsync.org. You can see it on our website too. So.
All right, cool. Well, let's go ahead and wrap things up. Happy Earth Day to everybody. If you haven't taken a look at our Facebook fundraising campaign, please go ahead and check it out. All of our donations are greatly appreciated. A special shout out to our recent donors, Mr. Baker in Memphis, Beatrice in Houston, Mama P from Houston, David from Chicago, Martin from Portland, Nolan from Boston, and of course, we couldn't forget our lovers from Lexington, Richard and Rory and Brooke. We love you so much. Okay, don't forget about our video release today, 3 p.m. Central Standard Time, and tonight's virtual, tonight's virtual concert at 7 p.m. Central Standard Time, that is Houston time, and tomorrow's live stream at 11 a.m. Central Standard Time. We will be talking with Kara and the bassoon and Ani on the French horn. Yay! See you guys tomorrow in the mañana. Happy Earth Day. Go plant a tree.